The arena on Prime was the oldest fighting ground in the known galaxy. It had stood for 500 years. The black stone floor had seen the blood of warriors from more than 100 different alien species. The seats around it could hold 60,000 people who came to watch fighters prove their worth. On this day, every seat was full. Daniel Cole walked through the gate and stepped onto the black stone. He was a human man of 32 years. He stood 6 feet tall with short brown hair and a face that showed no emotion. His body was covered in old scars from battles he had fought and survived. He wore simple gray armor and carried a plain steel sword at his side. The crowd made sounds of interest when they saw him. Humans were still new to the galaxy. They had only joined the Galactic Concord 3 years ago, when their ships had finally reached far enough into space to meet other species. In that short time, human soldiers had built a strange reputation. They were not the biggest. The warriors stood 9 feet tall and had muscles like mountains. They were not the fastest. They could move so quick that most eyes could not follow them. They were not the strongest. They could break metal with their hands alone. But humans had something else. Something that made other species both respect and fear them. Humans did not know when to stop. They fought when they were hurt. They fought when they were tired. They fought when any smart creature would give up and accept death. Stories spread through the galaxy about human soldiers who kept shooting after losing an arm. About human pilots who crashed their broken ships into enemy vessels rather than retreat. About human warriors who smiled when they were outnumbered because they saw it as a better challenge. The other species did not understand this. They called it madness. They called it stupidity. But they also called it dangerous. Daniel Cole had become famous for this human stubbornness. He had won 47 duels in arenas across 12 different worlds. He had never lost. He had never given up. He had earned the title of Champion of Earth, though he never used it himself. Today he would face his greatest test. The crowd grew louder as the opposite gate opened. A tall figure stepped out into the light of the artificial sun that hung above the arena. She was one of the oldest and proudest species in the galaxy. Her name was Commander Ev. She stood 7 feet tall. Her body was covered in scales that shone purple and gold under the light. She had 4 arms, and each arm held a curved blade made from a metal that glowed faintly blue. Her face was narrow and sharp, almost like a snake, and she had 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows of 3. All 6 eyes were fixed on Daniel with a look of complete hatred. They believed they were the greatest warriors in the universe. They had ruled 7 star systems before humans had learned to make fire. They had fought and won wars against dozens of other species. Their military academies were considered the finest anywhere. But lately, they had been losing. In the outer reach, where the borders of human space met territory, there had been small fights. Nothing big enough to start a real war, but enough to test both sides. They had expected easy victories against these young newcomers to the stars. They had been wrong. Human soldiers had beaten forces in 7 out of 10 encounters. Human tactics were strange and unpredictable. Human troops fought with a fury that shocked commanders. The losses had embarrassed the Dominion, and they wanted revenge. That was why was here. She was one of the finest warriors in the military. She had won over 200 duels without a single defeat. She had killed enemies from 20 different species. The High Command had sent her to this arena with one mission: destroy the human champion and prove that they were still the superior fighters. Walked to the center of the arena and stopped 20 feet from Daniel. She looked at him the way someone might look at an insect. So, she said, her voice loud enough for the whole arena to hear. This is the famous human warrior. I must say, I thought you would be bigger. Daniel did not respond. He simply stood there, watching her with calm eyes. An official walked to the center of the arena, standing between the 2 fighters. He was old, with faded gray scales, and he held a golden staff that marked his position as the arena master. "Warriors," he announced, "you have both agreed to fight under the ancient rules of Prime. The duel will continue until one fighter yields, is unable to continue, or leaves the arena. There are no other rules. Do you both understand?" "Oh, I understand," said Daniel, simply nodded. "Then prepare yourselves." The arena master walked away. The crowd fell silent. 60,000 beings from dozens of species held their breath, waiting. Daniel drew his sword. It was a simple blade made of steel from Earth. It had no decorations, no special technology, no glowing lights. Next to elegant weapons, it looked almost primitive. But Daniel had used this sword to win every one of his 47 duels. He trusted it more than any fancy alien technology. Took a fighting stance, her 4 blades moving into position. Her 6 eyes never blinked as she watched Daniel. "I am going to enjoy this," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "When I am done with you, the galaxy will remember what happens when primitives challenge their betters." Daniel said nothing. His face remained calm. He raised his sword to a ready position and waited. High above the arena, a great golden gong hung from chains of silver. An official raised a hammer and struck it once. The sound rang out across the arena like thunder. The duel had begun. Moved first. She was faster than Daniel had expected. Her 4 blades came at him from 4 different directions at the same time. High, low, left, right. It was a killing strike meant to end the fight before it truly started. Daniel was not there. He had stepped to the side at the last moment, letting her blades cut through empty air. His own sword flicked out, testing her defense, but she blocked it easily with one of her lower arms. They separated and circled each other. The crowd murmured in surprise. They had expected the human to die in the first exchange. Instead, he was still standing, still calm, still watching his opponent with those steady eyes. Attacked again, and again, and again. Her 4 blades wove patterns in the air that seemed impossible. She struck at Daniel from angles that should not exist. Her speed was incredible, her skill undeniable. Any normal fighter would have been cut to pieces in seconds. Daniel blocked. He dodged. He deflected. He moved like water flowing around rocks, always just out of reach, always just fast enough to survive. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The crowd watched in stunned silence. This was not what they had expected. This was not what anyone had expected. The human was not trying to win. He was not attacking. He was simply surviving, studying, learning. His eyes followed every movement of blades, memorizing her patterns, finding her weaknesses, and was beginning to realize it. She was growing tired. Her attacks were becoming slower, sloppier. Anger was building in her 6 eyes. She had expected a quick victory, a chance to humiliate the human champion in front of the whole galaxy. Instead, she was being made to look foolish by a creature she considered barely more than an animal. This was not how the duel was supposed to go. This was not how it was supposed to go at all. Minutes had passed since the gong sounded. The arena was silent except for the ring of metal against metal, and the soft sounds of feet moving on stone. Eth was breathing hard now. Sweat dripped from her scales and made dark spots on the black floor. Her 4 arms were starting to feel heavy. Her attacks had lost their sharpness. Daniel Cole looked exactly the same as when the fight started. His breathing was steady. His movements were smooth. His eyes still watched her with that terrible calm that made her want to scream. She stepped back and lowered her blades slightly. The crowd murmured at this sign of weakness, but she needed a moment to think. This human was not fighting the way she expected. He was not wild and emotional like humans were supposed to be. He was not making mistakes that she could use. He was just defending, always defending, like a wall that would not break no matter how hard she hit it. Worse, she could feel him learning. Every time she used a technique, it became less effective the next time. He was reading her like a book, memorizing her every move, finding every tiny flaw in her form. She had trained for 200 years. She had mastered fighting styles that took entire lifetimes to learn. And this human, this creature from a primitive rock in an unimportant corner of the galaxy, was making her look like a beginner. It was not possible. It was not fair. Felt her anger building. They prided themselves on emotional control, but she had never faced a situation like this before. She had never felt so frustrated, so helpless, so small. She needed to change the fight. She needed to find a weakness she could attack. Physical techniques were not working, so she would try something else. She would use words. Humans were emotional creatures. Everyone knew this. They let their feelings control their actions. They could be made angry, scared, or sad with nothing but words. And when a human lost control of their emotions, they made mistakes. They smiled, showing teeth that were sharp as needles. "You fight like a frightened child," she said, loud enough for the arena to hear. "All you do is run and hide. Is this the famous human courage I have heard so much about?" Daniel did not respond. He did not even blink. He just kept watching her with those steady brown eyes. Felt her anger grow hotter. How dare he ignore her? She was a commander of the Dominion. She had killed creatures far more dangerous than this human. She would not be dismissed like she was nothing. "I know why you will not attack," she continued. "You are afraid. You know that the moment you actually try to fight me, you will die. So you hide behind your defense like a coward, hoping I will tire before I kill you." Still nothing. The human just stood there, sword raised, face empty of expression. The crowd was whispering now. They could see what was trying to do. Some thought it was clever. Others thought it was beneath a warrior of her rank. But all of them watched closely, waiting to see if it would work. Began to pace around Daniel, her four blades catching the light of the artificial sun. She kept talking, letting her words flow like poison. "I have studied your species," she said. "Your history is written in blood and fire. You spent thousands of years killing each other over land, over resources, over ideas. Millions of your own kind slaughtered by their brothers and sisters. What kind of species does this?" She paused, watching for any reaction. She saw none. "They have never had such wars. We are civilized. We are united. We do not murder our own people for scraps of dirt. But you humans, you could not stop killing each other even when you had everything you needed. Because that is what you are. You are not warriors. You are animals. Vicious, stupid animals who learned to build ships and somehow stumbled into the stars." Daniel remained still. His sword did not waver. His eyes did not look away from her. Felt something close to panic rising in her chest. This should be working. Every species had weaknesses that could be triggered with words. They could be driven to rage by insults to their ancestors. They could be frozen with fear by threats to their families. Every species had something. But this human was showing nothing. He was like a stone, cold and unmoving. She decided to push harder. The losses in the outer reach were not victories, she said. They were accidents, luck. The soldiers who died were young and inexperienced. They underestimated your species. It will not happen again. When the real war fleets arrive, your little species will be crushed like insects. She moved closer to him, close enough that she could see herself reflected in his eyes. "And when that day comes, we will not just destroy your military. We will burn your worlds. We will make dust of your cities. We will hunt down every last human in the galaxy and end your species forever. And the universe will be better for it, because there will be no more humans to pollute it with your violence and your stupidity and your primitive ways." The crowd was completely silent now. This was beyond normal trash talk. This was a threat of genocide, spoken in front of 60,000 witnesses and broadcast to billions more across the galaxy. But did not care. She was too angry to care. She needed this human to break. She needed to see fear or rage or something in those empty eyes. She leaned even closer, her voice dropping to a hiss that only Daniel could hear. "I have heard about your family," she said. "Your mother was a soldier too, yes. She died in the first contact battle with the shot through the chest. They say she bled for hours before she finally stopped breathing. For the first time, she saw something flicker in Daniel's eyes. It was small, just a tiny spark, but it was there." She smiled wider. "She died screaming your name, lied, begging for her son to save her. But you were not there, were you? You were on the other side of the planet, safe and warm, while your mother choked on her own blood and called out for a son who never came." The spark in Daniel's eyes grew brighter. His jaw tightened just slightly. Felt triumph surge through her. She had found it. She had found his weakness. "Your mother was weak," she said. "Just like you. Just like all humans. She should have known better than to fight against real warriors. She should have stayed on your primitive little planet where she belonged. But instead she tried to play soldier, and she died like the fool she was." She raised one of her blades and pointed it at Daniel's face. "And now her son is going to die the same way. Alone, afraid, knowing that everything he fought for was meaningless, knowing that his species is nothing but a footnote in the history of the galaxy, knowing that his mother's death was as pointless as his own." She pulled back her blade and prepared to attack. "Any last words, human?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were no longer empty. Something burned there now, something deep and powerful. The crowd leaned forward, waiting for the explosion of human rage they had been promised. But when Daniel finally spoke, his voice was quiet and steady. "Yes," he said, "I have some last words." And then he opened his hand and let his sword fall to the ground. The blade clattered against the black stone. The sound echoed through the silent arena like a thunderclap in the night. Stared at the sword on the ground. She stared at Daniel. She could not understand what was happening. "Pick up your weapon," she demanded. Daniel did not move. Pick it up, she screamed. But Daniel Cole had already turned his back on her. He was walking toward the gate, walking away from the fight, walking away from everything she had tried to do to him. The human champion was leaving, and Eth could only stand there and watch him go. The sword lay on the black stone floor. It did not move. It did not glow. It was just a piece of metal, alone and forgotten. Daniel Cole walked toward the gate. His steps were slow and steady. His back was straight. He did not look behind him. The 60,000 beings in the arena could not believe what they were seeing. The human champion, the warrior who had never lost a fight, was walking away. He was leaving his sword on the ground and abandoning the duel. Eth stood frozen in the center of the arena. Her 4 blades hung at her sides. Her 6 eyes were wide with shock and confusion. "Stop," she shouted. "You cannot do this. Come back and fight me." Daniel kept walking. "This is against the rules," screamed. "You must fight. You must face me." The arena master, the old with the golden staff, stepped forward. His voice boomed across the arena through speakers that had been there for centuries. "There is no rule that says a warrior must fight," he announced. "The rules state that a duel ends when one fighter yields, is unable to continue, or leaves the arena. The human is leaving the arena. He has chosen to end the duel." "But that means he loses," shouted. "Tell him he loses." "The human forfeits the match," the arena master agreed. "Commander Eth is declared the winner." But nobody cheered. Nobody celebrated. The crowd just sat there in silence, watching Daniel Cole walk toward the gate. Ran after him. Her feet pounded against the black stone. She grabbed his shoulder with one of her hands and spun him around to face her. "You cannot run away," she hissed. "You are supposed to be the human champion. You are supposed to be the best your pathetic species has to offer, and you are just going to walk away." Daniel looked at her hand on his shoulder. Then he looked at her face. His expression was calm, almost peaceful. "Oh, yes," he said simply. "Why?" demanded. "I was winning. I had you beaten. Why would you give up now?" Daniel gently removed her hand from his shoulder. He did not push her away or hurt her. He just moved her hand aside as if it did not matter. "You were not winning," he said. "You could not touch me with your blades, so you tried to hurt me with your words. That is not victory. That is desperation. I was breaking you. I saw it in your eyes." "You saw anger," Daniel agreed. "When you spoke about my mother, yes, I felt anger. I felt rage. I wanted to take my sword and cut you into pieces for what you said." He paused. "But that is exactly what you wanted. You wanted me to lose control. You wanted me to attack in blind fury so you could kill me easily. And then you could tell everyone that humans are just violent animals who can be tricked into destroying themselves." Opened her mouth to argue, but Daniel continued. "I did not come here to prove that humans can be made angry. Everyone already knows that. I came here to show that humans can choose when to fight and when to walk away. That is something far more important than winning a duel." "You are a coward," spat. "A weak, pathetic coward." Daniel smiled slightly. It was a sad smile, the kind someone makes when they feel sorry for another person. "Maybe," he said. "But at least I am not someone who needs to insult a man's dead mother to feel powerful." He turned and walked away again. He stood there unable to move. Something was happening in the crowd around her. She could hear it starting, soft at first but growing louder. They were clapping. Not for her, for him. She spun around and looked up at the galleries. Beings from 100 different species were on their feet, slapping their hands together or making whatever gesture meant approval in their culture. The sound built and built until it filled the entire arena like thunder. They were applauding the human who had lost. They were celebrating the man who had walked away. Felt her stomach turn to ice. Daniel reached the gate. Before he stepped through, he stopped and turned back to look at the crowd. He gave a small nod, a simple gesture of thanks. Then he looked at one last time. The strongest thing a warrior can do is not winning, he called out, his voice somehow carrying across the roaring crowd. It is knowing when winning is not worth the cost. He walked through the gate and disappeared into the shadows beyond. The applause continued for a long time. I stood alone in the center of the arena. She had won the duel. The arena master had said so. She was the official victor. But as she looked around at the crowd still cheering for the human who had walked away, she realized something terrible. She had lost something far more important than a fight. The recording of the duel spread across the galaxy within hours. Billions of beings watched it on news networks and personal devices. They watched insults. They watched Daniel's silence. They watched the sword fall. They watched him walk away. And they watched the crowd applaud. The reaction was not what the Dominion had expected. On 100 worlds, beings talked about what they had seen. They talked about the human warrior who had refused to be baited. They talked about his calm face and steady voice. They talked about how he had chosen peace when everyone expected violence. For the first time, many species began to think about humans differently. Before, they had seen humans as dangerous animals, useful in a fight, but too emotional, too unstable, too violent to be trusted with anything important. The stories of human stubbornness had made them seem like creatures driven by instinct rather than thought. But now they had seen something else. They had seen a human make a choice, a hard choice. A choice that went against every instinct in his body. He had chosen to walk away. That single act changed more minds than 1,000 military victories could have. It showed the galaxy that humans were not just violence wrapped in skin. They were thinking beings who could control their emotions, who could rise above their anger, who could choose the harder path when the easy path led to destruction. On Earth, news of the duel reached the government within minutes. Officials watched the recording with worried faces. They expected disaster. They expected the other species to see Daniel's surrender as weakness. Instead, they found something very different. Messages began arriving from across the galaxy. Leaders of other species sent words of respect. Military commanders expressed admiration. Even species who had been unfriendly to humans before now asked for diplomatic meetings. The human who had walked away had done more for his species in 15 minutes than years of diplomacy had accomplished. And far away on Prime, in the empty arena where her victory had turned to ash, Commander Eth sat alone in the silence and wondered how everything had gone so wrong. 3 days after the duel, the Dominion released an official statement. They called Daniel Cole a coward who had shamed his species. They demanded that the human government apologize for his disgraceful behavior. They said that by refusing to fight, he had broken the sacred traditions of the arena and insulted all true warriors. Nobody believed them. The recording was too clear. The whole galaxy had watched words. They had heard her threaten to destroy humanity. They had heard her mock Daniel's dead mother. They had seen everything. Within a week, the Dominion faced something they had not experienced in 1,000 years. Other species were angry at them. Ambassador S was the first to speak publicly. There were giant warriors who respected strength above all else. Many had expected them to side with who had officially won the duel. Instead, S said something that shocked everyone. The human Daniel Cole showed the mark of a true warrior, he announced. He knew that his opponent was not worth his blade. He knew that fighting her would give her exactly what she wanted. So he chose a victory that was greater than any blood could bring. The honor his wisdom. Other species followed. The council, who rarely spoke about anything, released a formal statement. They praised Daniel for showing the spiritual discipline that humanity has achieved in their remarkably short time among the stars. Even who loved physical combat more than any species in the galaxy, admitted that there was a certain strength in knowing when not to fight. But the biggest surprise came from within the Dominion itself. Eth had expected to return home as a hero. She had won the duel. She had defeated the human champion. She had restored pride. Instead, she found herself facing a military tribunal. The charges were serious. Conduct unbecoming and warrior. Bringing shame upon the Dominion. Speaking words that damaged honor in front of the entire galaxy. The trial lasted only 2 days. The evidence was the recording itself. Everyone could see what had done. Everyone could hear what she had said. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all charges. Commander Eth was stripped of her rank. Her military honors were taken away. Her name was removed from the list of champions. She was banned from ever serving in the military again. Her career was over. Her reputation was destroyed, and all because she had won a duel. Meanwhile, Daniel Cole returned to Earth without giving any interviews. He went back to his job at the United Nations Defense Academy, where he trained young soldiers. He did not talk about what had happened on Prime. He did not brag about the attention he had received. He just went back to work. But the journalists would not leave him alone. They followed him everywhere. They sent hundreds of messages asking for interviews. They camped outside his apartment and his workplace, hoping to catch a few words from the man everyone was talking about. Finally, after 3 months, Daniel agreed to one interview. Just one. A reporter named Lisa Park from Earth News Network sat down with him in a small room at the Defense Academy. She had prepared dozens of questions, but she started with the one everyone wanted to know. Why did you walk away? Daniel was quiet for a moment. He looked out the window at the young soldiers training in the yard below. Because she wanted me to stay, he finally said. I do not understand. Daniel turned to look at her. His eyes were calm and thoughtful. Everything she said was designed to make me angry. She wanted me to lose control. She wanted me to attack her in blind rage so she could kill me easily. And more importantly, she wanted the galaxy to see humans as violent animals who could not control themselves. He paused. If I had attacked her, she would have won. Even if I killed her, she would have won. Because the whole point was to prove that humans are nothing but savage creatures. And I would have proved her right. Lisa leaned forward. But were you not angry? After everything she said about your mother? I was furious, Daniel admitted. When she spoke those words, I wanted to hurt her more than I have ever wanted anything. Every part of me was screaming to pick up my sword and make her pay for what she said. Then how did you stop yourself? Daniel smiled slightly. Because that is exactly what she expected. That is what everyone expected. The moment you let someone else control your actions, you have already lost. It does not matter if you win the fight. If your enemy decides when you fight and how you fight, then you are not really in control at all. He stood up and walked to the window. My mother taught me that. She was a soldier, yes, but she always said that the hardest battles are the ones you fight inside yourself. Anyone can swing a sword when they are angry. The real strength is in choosing not to. Lisa asked more questions, but that answer was the one that stayed with people. That was the quote that spread across the galaxy. That was what people remembered. The moment you let someone else control your actions, you have already lost. The interview was watched by billions. It was translated into hundreds of alien languages. It was discussed in military academies and political meetings and ordinary homes on worlds Daniel had never heard of. And slowly, the reputation of humanity began to change. Before the duel on Prime, other species had seen humans as useful but dangerous. Good in a fight, but too emotional to trust with important things. Like wild animals that could be pointed at an enemy but never truly controlled. After the duel, they began to see something different. They saw that humans could choose. They saw that behind the famous human stubbornness was a mind that could think, reason, and make decisions even under the worst pressure. That was more frightening than any display of violence could ever be. Because a creature that fights on instinct is predictable. You can bait it. You can trick it. You can use its emotions against it. But a creature that can choose when to fight and when to walk away, that creature is impossible to predict. That creature is dangerous in ways that go far beyond physical strength. And Daniel Cole had just shown the galaxy that humans were exactly that kind of creature. In the months that followed, humanity's position in the galactic concord grew stronger. Other species began treating human diplomats with more respect. Trade agreements became easier to negotiate. Old enemies started talking about peace. All because one man had dropped his sword and walked away. But the story was not finished yet. Far away on a disgraced former commander sat alone in a small apartment, watching the interview with Daniel Cole for the 100th time. Ed had lost everything: her rank, her honor, her purpose. She had spent months trying to understand what had gone wrong, and she was finally beginning to see the truth. She had not lost because Daniel was stronger or faster or more skilled. She had lost because she had become exactly the kind of warrior she had accused him of being: wild, emotional, unable to control herself. And he had shown her what true strength really looked like. It was a lesson she would never forget. 10 years passed. The galaxy changed in ways nobody had expected. The small conflicts between humans and stopped completely. Trade routes opened between species that had been enemies for centuries. A new era of cooperation began, and many historians traced its beginning to a single moment in an arena on Prime. The duel became legendary. It was studied in military academies across 40 star systems. Philosophers wrote books about what it meant. Children learned about it in school. The story of the human who dropped his sword became one of the most famous tales in the known galaxy. Daniel Cole did not enjoy his fame. He stayed at the Defense Academy for 5 more years, training soldiers and teaching them the same lesson he had shown the galaxy. Then he retired and moved to a small farm in Montana, far from the cities and the journalists, and the people who wanted to shake his hand. He grew vegetables. He raised chickens. He read books and watched the stars at night. He lived a simple life, the kind of life his mother had always wanted for him. But the galaxy did not forget him. One morning, a message arrived from the Dominion. It was an official request, stamped with the seals of the highest levels of their government. They were asking General Daniel Cole, retired, to visit there. Daniel almost threw the message away. He had no desire to return to space. He had no desire to remember what had happened in that arena 10 years ago. He just wanted to be left alone. But something made him read the full message. And when he did, he found something he did not expect. The request was personal. It came from someone who wanted to meet him face to face. Someone who said they had spent 10 years preparing for this moment. The name at the bottom of the message was Ev. Daniel thought about it for a long time. He walked around his farm. He fed his chickens. He watched the sun set over the mountains, and finally he decided he would go. The journey took 3 weeks. Daniel spent most of it alone in his small cabin, reading and thinking. He was not sure what to expect when he arrived. He was not sure he wanted to know. The was called. It was a beautiful planet of purple forests and golden oceans. The cities were old and elegant, built by a civilization that had been ancient when humans were still living in caves. Daniel landed at the main spaceport and walked down the ramp into the warm air. He looked around, expecting guards or officials or some kind of formal greeting. Instead, there was just one person waiting for him. She was older now. Her scales had faded from bright purple and gold to pale gray. She moved slowly, carefully, like someone whose body had started to fail her. Her 6 eyes were clouded with age. But Daniel recognized her immediately. General Cole said. Her voice was quiet, nothing like the powerful shout he remembered from the arena. "Thank you for coming." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "Former general," he said. "I retired years ago, and I am a former commander. It seems we have that in common." They stood in silence. Around them, the busy spaceport continued its work. Ships landed and took off. Beings from dozens of species walked past without noticing the two old warriors standing there. "Why did you ask me to come?" Daniel finally asked. Lowered her head. It was a gesture of respect in culture, something she had never shown to any human before. "Because I owe you something," she said. "Something I have carried for 10 years, and I could not die without giving it to you." She looked up at him. "I am sick," she explained. "The doctors say I have perhaps 1 year left, maybe less. Before I go, there is something I need to say." Daniel waited and took a deep breath. It was hard for her. Even now, after all these years, the words did not come easily. "I was wrong," she said. "About everything, about you, about humanity, about what strength really means. I thought I understood warriors, but I knew nothing. I was arrogant and cruel and stupid." Tears began to form in her clouded eyes. "When you walked away from me in that arena, I hated you. I blamed you for everything that happened to me. I told myself that you were a coward who tricked me somehow." She shook her head. "But over the years, I watched that recording again and again. I studied it. I tried to understand what you did and why you did it. And eventually, I saw the truth." "What truth?" Daniel asked. "You gave me a gift," said. "The most important gift anyone has ever given me. You showed me who I really was. Not the warrior I pretended to be, but the scared and angry person hiding behind all those blades and all that pride." She reached out with one trembling hand and took Daniel's hand in hers. "You gave me a mirror, and because of that, I spent the last 10 years trying to become someone better, someone worthy of the honor I claimed to have." Daniel looked at their joined hands. He thought about his mother, who had died so many years ago. He thought about the anger he had felt in that arena. He thought about all the things he could have done, all the ways that day could have ended differently. Did it work? He asked. Did you become someone better? He smiled. It was a sad smile, but also peaceful. I do not know, she admitted. I hope so. I have tried. I have spent years teaching young that true strength is not about defeating enemies. It is about defeating the weakness inside yourself. She squeezed his hand. I teach them about you, about what you did that day. I tell them that the greatest warrior I ever faced was a human who chose not to fight. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. The old anger he had carried for so long seemed to grow lighter, smaller, less important. I forgive you, he said. The words surprised both of them. His eyes widened. More tears fell down her faded scales. You do not have to, she whispered. After what I said about your mother, you do not have to forgive me anything. I know, Daniel said, but I choose to. Because holding on to anger is like carrying a heavy stone. It does not hurt the other person. It only hurts yourself. He smiled at her. My mother taught me that too. They stood together for a long moment. Two old warriors who had been enemies once, holding hands in the middle of a busy spaceport. Around them, the galaxy continued to spin, full of conflict and cooperation, hatred and love, war and peace. Would you like to walk with me? Asked. I would like to show you my world, the beautiful parts, not just the arenas. Daniel nodded. I would like that. They walked together into the city, moving slowly to match his careful pace. The purple trees swayed in the warm breeze. The golden sun shone down on streets that had been built before humanity discovered fire. Behind them, the story of the duel on Prime continued to spread. It was being told in military academies and schools, in homes and ships, on planets across the galaxy. But it was no longer just a story about a human who refused to fight. It was a story about something bigger, something that all species could understand, no matter where they came from or what they believed. It was a story about the power of choice, about the strength it takes to walk away from anger, about the courage required to forgive. It was a story about what happens when someone shows you who you really are, and you have the wisdom to listen. And it was a story that would be remembered long after both warriors were gone, passed down through generations. A light in the darkness for anyone who needed to remember that even the deepest wounds can heal, if you choose to let them. The end.